Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yukta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Ashata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. It's nice to be back with all of you after a little bit of a break. Hope everybody had a nice holiday.
I heard you were in Vrindavan.
I was in Vrindavan.
All right.
Yes. And I brought some special blessings from Vrindavan, which I will be sharing afterwards. All of us. So it was a nice trip. Hope everybody is off to a great new year, great 2023. The best New Year's resolutions we can make, our Krishna conscious resolutions. It's how we can become more serious and enthusiastic in devotional service. We make resolutions for the purpose of, advancing our life, right? Making some resolutions. They're always there to how do we find improvement in our life? Well, ultimately, without Krishna consciousness in our life, whatever levers we try to pull will not find the value. It's like you say, if you have 5 zeros, it means nothing. If you have 10 zeros, it means nothing. But if you put a 1 in front of those zeros, now it has some value. That is Krishna. When we bring Krishna into the center of all the things that we're aspiring for, then it finds value. So, wish you the best Krishna conscious New Year, and make it a year of great success and progress in devotional service. So, today we're going to be discussing the 12th verse of Bhagavad Gita. It's a very important verse because it's the first instruction Krishna gives. So we're already in the 2nd chapter, the 12th verse. And Krishna has not given one instruction yet. he's actually barely spoken. Arjuna has been presenting all the reasons why he should not fight, giving all of his analysis. But in the 7th verse we saw Arjuna did the most intelligent of things. He surrendered to Krishna. He said, now you tell me what is best for me. And why did Arjuna ask Krishna to tell him what is best for him? Why would Arjuna tell Krishna, you please tell me what is best for me?
Because he trusts him.
Because he trusts him. Yeah.
Because he loves him.
He loves him. So love and trust. So as someone, yeah.
There's no other routes.
He has no other route, right? No other place to go. Because could Arjuna solve his own problems?
No, you have to surrender.
He had to surrender. He understood that his own intelligence, his own abilities was not going to solve his problems. Whatever he had learned, he had good teachers. He had great upbringing. He had great surroundings to learn so many things. Yet he could not solve his issues. And so what he did, because he had no other route, because he had love and trust, he surrendered to Krishna. And that is our greatest fortune if we can follow in that same footsteps. Because factually, we have no clue ourselves. We have no idea. But our false ego leads us to believe, I got it. I'm going to figure it out. But we know nobody before us has. Billions and billions of people have traversed this earth and have not found this everlasting peace and happiness. They've tried. But we convince ourselves, I'll figure it out. That is our free will. But once we realize that actually we cannot figure it out on our own, and that Krishna has the answers, then we can actually surrender. Until then, we won't surrender. It's a nature of surrender. We must be convinced that I have no other option, and I must be convinced that Krishna can instruct me because I trust and love. When those two things manifest, then surrender can happen. So this was a great position Arjuna came to. And then Krishna begins to speak, and he starts to chastise him a little bit. Krishna's smiling. And then he's basically saying, Arjuna, what does he say? While speaking learned words, you are mourning what is not worthy of grief. Those who lament neither for the living nor for the dead. He's basically calling him a fool. You are speaking big, big words, but you have no clue. Now, friends can say this, friends, as a way to get Arjuna's attention. So Arjuna is now going to hear. And this 12th verse, very important because it's, again, the very first instruction Krishna is going to give. The very first statement Krishna is going to make. And we know Krishna has only one goal in speaking to Arjuna. What is his singular goal?
To make him realize his duties.
To make him
Realize his duties.
to make him realize his duties, so that, for what goal, what end goal for Arjuna? What does he want for Arjuna?
To fight in the battle.
He wants him to fight in the battle.
Dharma stuff.
He wants him to follow Dharma.
And be liberated from this material, limitations and the foundations from the material world.
Okay, so to become free from all the limitations of the material world.
He wants to understand that Arjuna, whatever he's speaking, bodily, looking, whatever it is, those are.
So he wants to correct Arjuna's line of thinking, Because what is the relationship between Krishna and Arjuna? They're friends. And what is the position of Arjuna, the mental state of Arjuna at this point?
He's a devotee.
He surrendered. But what preceded his surrender?
Didn't want to kill his relatives.
He didn't want to kill his relatives. Right? And what was his emotional state of being? Confused. Agitated. Scared. Shaking. Not knowing what to do. Stress. Full of anxiety. So when a friend comes to us in such a situation, what do we want to do to them, for them? Help them. Help them get out from their condition. Right? But if a friend comes to us and is in some extreme situation, are we guaranteed that we can help them?
We try.
We'll try. But why are we not guaranteed to be able to help them?
We give
We're
our
not
best.
We're not Paramatma. We try our best, but is our best always enough? Because we are limited. Does Krishna have the same situation? Is Krishna guaranteed to be able to help Arjuna?
Yes. Because he's absolute.
Because he's absolute. Not even a blade of grass can move in the wind without the approval of the Lord. So Krishna is unlimited. So he has no inabilities. He has complete capabilities. So when Arjuna came to him in distress, Krishna is going to give the perfect instructions, the complete instructions on how to come out from his situation. Because that's his goal. As a friend in need, in trouble, we try to help. So Krishna is going to help. So everything Krishna is going to speak in this Bhagavad Gita, he has one goal. To give Arjuna peace and happiness. That is his only goal in speaking. Krishna has nothing to gain from speaking. Why does Krishna have nothing to gain?
He has everything already.
He has everything already. He is Atma Rama, self-satisfied. Are we self-satisfied?
No, we're always looking for more.
If we are hungry, we need something external to satisfy us. Right? If I am thirsty, I need something external to satisfy. If I want some entertainment, I'm bored, I need some. That's the definition of not being self-support. But Krishna, he has no external need. He is fully self-satisfied. That's why he's called Atmarama. Full of pleasure within himself. So then, he has no other purpose to speak but out of love for Arjuna. So we should keep this very clear in our mind that he's only speaking to help Arjuna. And he has nothing himself to gain. When Krishna says, you surrender the fruits of your work and you give them to me, it sounds like, wow, Krishna has something to gain, right? And actually, Krishna has nothing to gain from our fruits. It is we who have to gain by detaching, as an example. So let's read now this 12th verse with this understanding, and recognize that this is, excuse me, very important verse. It's the first instruction Krishna is making. So it's a little bit of a long purport, but we'll work through it. So somebody would like to read the verse? You can read English.
Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Purport. In the Vedas, in the Katha Upanishad, as well as in the Shweta Shastra Upanishad, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer of innumerable living entities. In terms of their different situations, according to individual work and reaction of work, the the Supreme Personality of Godhead is also by his plenary portions alive in the heart of every living entity. Only saintly persons who can see within and without the same Supreme Lord can actually attain to perfect and eternal peace. Nityo Nityam Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadhati Kaman Tam Atmashtam Ye Nupyasyanti Dhiras Tesam Sanita Saswati Netrasam. The same Vedic truth given to Arjun is given to all persons in the world who pose themselves as very learned but factually have but a poor fund of knowledge. The Lord says clearly that he himself, Arjuna, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings, and the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living entities, both in their condition and in their liberated situations. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supreme individual person, and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. It is not that they did not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality existed in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. Therefore, there is no cause for lamentation for anyone.
Somebody else want to read?
The Mayavadi theory that after liberation, the individual soul separated by the covering of Maya or illusion will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence is not supported herein by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Authority. Nor is the theory that we only think of individuality in the conditioned state supported herein. Krishna clearly says herein that in the future, also the individuality of the Lord and others, as it is confirmed in the Upanishads, will continue eternally. This statement of Krishna's is authoritative because Krishna cannot be subject to illusion. If individuality were not a fact, then Krishna would not have stressed it so much, even for the future. The Mayavadi may argue that the individuality spoken of by Krishna is not spiritual but material. Even accepting the argument that the individuality is material, then how can one distinguish Krishna's individuality? Krishna affirms his individuality in the past and confirms his individuality in the future also. He has confirmed his individuality in many ways, and impersonal Brahman has been declared to be subordinate to him.
Page 77.
Krishna has
Spiritual individuality all along. He is accepted as an ordinary conditioned soul in individual consciousness. Then his Bhagavad Gita has no value as authoritative scripture. A common man with all the full depth effects of human frailty is unable to teach that which is worth hearing. The Gita is above such literature. No mundane book compares with Bhagavad Gita. When one accepts Krishna as an ordinary man, the Gita loses all importance. The Mayavadi argues that plurality mentioned in this verse is conventional and that it refers to the body. But previous to this verse, such bodily conception is already condemned. After condemning the bodily conception of the living entities, how was it possible for Krishna to place a conventional proposition on the body again? Therefore, individuality is maintained on spiritual grounds and is thus confirmed by great acharyas like Sri Ramanuja and others. It is clearly mentioned that in many places in Gita that the spiritual individuality is understood by those who are devotees of the Lord. Those who are envious of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead have no bona fide access to the great literature. The non-devotees' approach to the teaching of the Gita is something like that of a bee licking on a bottle of honey, one cannot have a taste of honey unless one opens the bottle. Anybody else want to read? Should I continue?
Similarly, the mysteries of Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees, and no one else can taste it, as it is stated in the fourth chapter of the book. Nor can the Gita be touched by persons who envy the very existence of the Lord. Therefore, Mayavadi explains of the Gita is the most misleading perceptions of whole truth. Lord Chaitanya has forbidden us to read commentations made by the Mayavadis and warns that one who takes to such an understanding of the Mayavadi's philosophy loses all power to understand the real mystery of Gita. If individuality refers to the empirical universe, then there is no need of teaching by the Lord. The plurality of individual soul and the Lord is eternal fact, and it is confirmed by the Vedas as above mentioned.
Alright, so long purport. So let's break it up into a few pieces. So again, the verse says, "Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you. Nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be." So what was Arjuna's principal concern?
You don't want to kill anyone.
You don't want to kill anyone, right? So Krishna has just said in a prior verse, the wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So now Krishna is giving the opening instruction here. None of us shall cease to be. Because Arjuna's worry is that if he fights, those on the other side will end, will cease to be. But we know that's not the case, right? Because Arjuna is looking at the
spirit soul. The spirit soul.
The spirit
not the
soul.
body.
right? So Krishna is telling Arjuna that the soul is never ceases to be. It's always there. And your eternality is eternal. Your individuality is eternal. So don't lament the body. The wise, they understand this. So now, a couple important points before we get into the details of this. Prabhupada gives this example of licking the bottle of honey. Right? What does that mean? What is he trying to tell us?
If you want to taste it, you have to open the bottle.
Okay.
Otherwise, you won't know the taste.
Okay, so you have to open the bottle. Yeah?
And lick the honey, and then only you'll understand.
So you have to taste the honey. Does tasting the bottle give you the taste of honey? So, in what is the point Prabhupada is making with this example?
You have to open the book and read it.
You have to open the book and read it.
But
But
in the position of being surrendered to Lord Krishna, or else you will be licking the bottle.
so we must be in the mood of surrendered devotion. Our consciousness must be right in order for this knowledge to enter into the heart. We can read it. But if our consciousness is not right, nothing will penetrate. Just like if I show up in the classroom and I'm convinced that the teacher doesn't know anything and I know everything, will I learn anything? Because my consciousness is not right. So similarly, to approach the Bhagavad Gita, one must approach it in the spirit of devotion. Then one can taste the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. So it's very important, and that's why we're very fortunate that Srila Prabhupada has presented his Bhagavad Gita as it is, with a bona fide commentaries. Because there are many misrepresentations of the Bhagavad Gita. Many misrepresentations of the Bhagavad Gita, in which the knowledge is not coming through Guru Parampara, and thus it doesn't have any validity. So we must be careful. So now let us go back to the beginning of this purport. Are we eternal? Soul is eternal, but body's not eternal. We know that, right? It's deteriorating. Right? Those of us advanced a little bit in age, we know, boy, 10 years ago I could do so many more things. So the body is deteriorating. But the soul is? Is the soul aging?
No.
When was the soul born?
It was there. It's never gone.
It never was born. When will it die?
Never gonna die.
That's the definition of eternal. We can't wrap our brains around eternal. Because everything we see in the material world has a beginning and an end. Right? There's a cycle, right? So when I say, no, but the soul had to have it had to, okay, it came from Krishna. At some point it had to separate from Krishna. We cannot do this. But we know it is eternal. It was always there, and it always will be there. Now, there's one very important then conclusion from that. Krishna says, nor in the future shall either of us cease to be. So we know if Krishna, if Arjuna kills Duryodhana on the battlefield, is Duryodhana ending? Is he done? No. No. Just his body is. Right? But soul is? So we know in that context, soul continues. How about when the soul liberates, moksha, goes back to the spiritual world? Then what happens?
When the soul also doesn't come back, right? We go back to the content.
Doesn't come back, yeah. But what happens to the soul? Does it maintain individuality?
I think we will join with God.
You join with God?
It says that it's maintained.
It
That it's maintained on a
Yes.
spiritual grounds.
It says it's maintained on a spiritual ground. So now we have, what do you all think? So on one hand, it merges into God. On the other hand, it's maintained. What does Krishna say in the verse? In the future, what happens?
It will not cease to exist. It will still be there.
If I pull out a drop of ocean water, right? Have I separated the drop from the ocean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, if I put that drop back into the ocean,
It will merge into the ocean.
it merges into the ocean. Right? So, is this what happens to the soul? Or is it, let me give you a different example. When a river flows into the ocean, does the river water become distinguishable from the ocean? Can you distinguish the river water from the ocean water? No. But now, if there's a fish in the river, and the fish is going with the current, and it flows into the ocean, does the fish become the ocean? It is simply gone from the river to the ocean. But it has maintained its. Now, which one of those two examples do you think illustrates what happens to the soul when it goes back home to Godhead? The fish in the water, or the drop of ocean water back into the ocean?
I think both.
Both, okay.
So the fish
Maybe
is
the fish
coming back
example.
as a rebirth, and a drop of water is like moksha.
Okay.
So you merges with Paramatma, but you still have your individuality maintained.
So how do you merge and have individuality? How can you have both? The drop of ocean water, when it merges into the ocean, it becomes indistinguishable. Thus, there's no individuality. All becomes one. So, now we're stumped.
When the soul is naked, when we lose all of our bodily concepts, then we merge.
Okay, so when the
fish has no body, then it merges.
Okay, so when the soul loses its conditioning, it merges. That's one idea. But then, does Krishna's statement hold? It doesn't hold, right? So this is a major misconception that is so easily addressed right here in the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. Moksha is not merging into God. You can never become God. God is God. Moksha is not merging into God. Actually, moksha, liberation, is not even going from here to there. What does liberation really mean? It is consciousness. It means to be liberated from the material world. But so when the soul goes back to the spiritual world, it maintains its individuality. Because never was there a time when I did not exist, nor in the future. So there's no concept of merging into God. We always remain individual. That is never negated. That is the nature of the spirit soul. It is Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, eternally a fragmental part of the Supreme Lord. So it is only a question of in which realm the soul is. Is it in the river, the material world, or is it in the ocean, the spiritual world? Yes, the soul may acquire many different types of bodies and coverings. Those material coverings will change. When the soul returns back to the spiritual world, it assumes its spiritual body. It has a form. And that form separate from Krishna's. Yes?
What is individuality in terms of the soul? So, like, what are the characteristics of an individual, like, that a soul expresses? Like, because I assume personality is like a material thing, right?
It has free will. Ultimately, the expression of the soul, individuality, is its free will. You express your free will, and I express my free will. We are not bound by the same expression of free will. That's individuality. So the soul has the ability to make decisions. And based on that, different responses are generated. But this individuality is never lost. It was always there, and it always will be there.
So are we then making decisions in the spiritual world too?
Of course. Yes. Because the soul is active. And by nature, when the soul is active, it's going to make decisions. Shall I do this today or that today? So there is full conscious. If we have consciousness here, then how there cannot be consciousness in the spiritual world? If we have personalities here and relationships here, how there cannot be relationships in the spiritual world? Everything that exists here, because this is a reflection, has to be in the spiritual world. When you look in the mirror, can you see anything in the mirror that's not on your face? Can you see some dot in the mirror? Well, that's just like a mark on it. A clean mirror that's not on your face. No. Because what you see in the mirror can only be exactly what? is in the original object.
But you can think. The mirror thing will not be able to think about anything.
I'm not talking thinking. All I'm saying is what is present here. We have individuality here. We have relationships here. We have personalities here. That exists also in the spiritual world. So spiritual world is not some abstract, what they call amorphous state of nothingness. No, it is full of variety. It is full of exchanges between the living entities and Krishna. So the individuality never. So moksha is not about merging into God. This is one of the, unfortunately, sadly, the vast majority of spiritual knowledge that's presented in the world today propagates this fallacy. It sounds good. Oh, you become liberated, you can become God. Oh, sign me up. But it's complete. And actually the devotees understand that actually between God and Krishna and the devotee, who enjoys more? In your home, who enjoys more, kids or the parents? In our Father's home, the spiritual world, who's going to enjoy more? Simple. Very simple. So the devotee knows, I don't want that responsibility. I just want to enjoy with Krishna.
So what, can I ask you a question? So just like in the material world, we're on a journey, we're on a path. So in the spiritual world, we'll be on another path to possibly another level of consciousness.
Well, I'll answer that in a general term and then more specific. Generally, to enter the spiritual world, we must become to the point of perfect consciousness. Completely, 100% free of bodily consciousness and fully aware of my relationship with the Supreme Lord. It's what we call pure devotional service. Anyabhilashita shunyam gyanakamariinavartam anukulina Krishna anushilana bhaktir uttama. So, the whole spiritual realm is a place of pure bhakti. Now, so that's the general. But within the spiritual world, there is what we call perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. But we cannot even contemplate that, right? Because how can something be perfect, then something be more perfect, right? That means this is not quite. We can't. But that actually is that. So there is a concept of progression further in the spiritual world. But for our intents and purposes, we can understand that when we perfect our consciousness here in the material world, we then will go back home, back to God. We can set aside that secondary piece as a more of a minor technicality we can maybe discuss later. But for all intents and purposes, when we perfect our consciousness, then one returns back home. But maintains their individuality, their relationship with Krishna. When you merge into something, relationship has to be expressed between two people. Love is expressed between two people. Service is expressed between. It cannot be expressed between two amorphous objects. So this is the nature. Very, very important. And again, very misunderstood. But how early in the Bhagavad Gita does Krishna clarify this conception? The very first statement he makes. Never was there a time that I didn't exist, nor you. So he's saying, I'm eternal, Krishna is saying, and you are eternal, Arjuna. And in the future, shall cease to be. So if we're eternal and Krishna is eternal, are we all this? Are we the same as Krishna? What's the difference?
Individuality.
So Krishna is individual, we are individual. So we're in. What's the difference?
Krishna is the supreme.
Krishna is the supreme.
He's the ultimate source.
He's the ultimate source.
He is the master, we are the servant.
He's the master, we are the servant. Wow, we can just close up. Well done. Now we have to turn this gyan into vigyan, realized knowledge, right? Because when we wake up in the morning, we think, I am the master, what am I going to do today? But that is exactly correct. And one fundamental point, so we see this verse, this Nitya, Nityananam, Chaitananas, Chaitananam, that there are many eternals. But Eko, one, Mahunam, one of the eternals is maintaining all other eternals. Who is that eternal that's maintaining all others? Now Prabhupada makes the point here in the purport that he is maintaining the individual living entities both in the conditioned and liberated state. So let's take each of those. In the material world, are we being maintained by Krishna? How often? All the time? Every millisecond? Every. Did we bring into this world the necessities to maintain ourselves?
No.
Right? Like when we go on a trip, we pack our bags with all the things we need for ourselves, right? So that we can maintain ourselves. If you're going camping, you bring your food, your sleeping, all these things. Did you bring all that into this world? All the things you need? You came empty-handed. And you're going to leave?
Empty-handed.
So who is providing all the things that we need to exist in this world? I heard material, I heard karma, I heard Krishna. Actually, all that is right. Krishna is the ultimate source. Nature is there, right? You're saying, no, nature is providing me sunlight so that we can grow foods. If you have all the wealth in the world but no sunlight, can you exist? If you don't have oxygen, can you exist? So who's providing that? You can say nature. Who's arranged nature?
Sun is getting his energy from Krishna.
So we keep having to go, okay, where does nature come from? Where does the sun come? Ultimately, it'll bring us to Krishna. Because he is the supreme source, the creator. So, Krishna is maintaining us in this eternal world. Well, how about in the spiritual world? If he's maintaining us here, don't think we're going to become this all-powerful personality in the spiritual world and maintain ourselves. We're eternally dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Eternally dependent. The idea that I can graduate, excuse me, to independence, because we are a tiny infinitesimal spark of the Supreme Lord. So we will be eternally maintained by the Lord, both in the material world and in the spiritual world. So that is a distinction. We are eternal, Krishna is eternal, but we are different. Yes?
So, I don't know how to word this question. I was thinking about it for a while. But you know, so the main thing about the material world is that everything is negative and continues negative. But in the spiritual world, everything is positive and continues positive for most things. Or for everything. What does personality mean for a soul in the spiritual world? Because I feel like in the material world, we define our personalities off our negative traits. and then it. Does that make sense? I don't know. Like, it's just hard to imagine a personality.
Personality in the
perfect
material world is not all negative. We have humor, we have friendship, we have chivalry, we have all these characteristics. All those characteristics exist in their pure form in the spiritual world. So, the relationships we have in the material world, we have relationships with each other. And we have relationships with certain people because we have a connection, certain people we don't, whatever. But there's a relationship that exists. There's personality traits that exist within all of us that attract us to certain people, and we develop, relationships, right? Well, where do those personality traits come from?
Krishna. Is it that he has all of them?
He's all of them.
Yeah.
What he could not have? How we could have something that Krishna doesn't have? He's the source, right? Whatever money the child has, can it ever be more than the father? I mean, until they grow up, yes. But in that childhood state, no, because whatever the child has, it comes from father, right? So, all the personality traits and relationships that we maintain in this material world, the quality of those exist in their pure state in the spiritual world. So, in the spiritual world, there is joking and laughing with each other. There is, working together and doing some activities. There is, friendship. There is this, maintenance type of life. These relationships exist, but in their pure form. And what defines pure versus impure? Everything we do in this material world is for who? For me. I, me, and mine. That's it. That's it. And in the spiritual world, what is everything done for? Krishna. That's the distinction. You want to know the difference between material world and spiritual world? Simply that. Am I working for me or for Krishna? So in the spiritual world, everybody is working for the pleasure of Krishna. In the material world, everybody is working for themselves. And what is the result of that? Conflict. Right? So, that is the name. But in the spiritual world, what is Krishna working for? For the pleasure of his devotees. So devotees are working exclusively for the pleasure of Krishna. And Krishna is working exclusively for the pleasure of his devotees. This is love. Love is selfless. Not, I will love you if. If. We put all the ifs. Material world, full of ifs. Because I, me, and mine. Ultimately, I want something from it. But in the spiritual world. So these relationships that we have here, the types of qualities of interaction, they exist also in the spiritual world because there's individuality. But it exists in this pure state. With perfect experience.
But does that mean that they won't have any personality?
Of course
because
so.
it's
Yeah. Some will be
they are all pure. They all have the same goals, making Krishna happy. So they don't have individual personality. Like somebody might have more skills than the other person, or somebody is more better devotee than the other. So these kind of discrepancies won't be there, right? Then.
Better will not be there because everything is perfect, but different, of course. Variety is there. Variety is the spice of life. Krishna enjoys variety. So there are unlimited varieties of personalities in the spiritual world. Some enjoy with Krishna in a very serious way. Some enjoy with Krishna in a very playful mood. Some enjoy with Krishna in a very, sort of parental mood. There's these different relationships and different personalities. If you look at, like the gopis and how they enjoy with Krishna, Lalita Devi, she has a very sharp tongue, and she is very sharp with Krishna, because Krishna enjoys that. whereas others are very subservient. So Krishna enjoys all these different personalities. So there's full variety, but they're all perfect. There's no concept of one is better than the other. But it is not all the same. We are not all one type of person, one relationship, and thus it's full of monotony. No. If there's variety here in the material world, then imagine what kind of variety must exist in the spiritual world. Unlimited varieties, Prabhupada says. So that is personality. But it is pure. Yeah.
When you say a spiritual world, you are mentioning about the Swarga, Naraka, those kind of Vaikuntha. Those are the world you are talking when the spiritual world is?
Vaikuntha and beyond. So, the heavenly planets in the material world are still material. Where up the Brahma Lok, it is all still in the material world. Once one crosses the Viraja River and enters into Vaikuntha and Goloka Vrindavan ultimately, that is the spiritual world. The place of eternality.
So where is this Vaikuntha in the 14 lokas?
It is beyond. See, the 14 lokas are part of the material world. Right? So from Tata Lok to Brahma Lok, the 14 planetary systems, that's all within the material world. Does Brahma die?
Yeah.
Yeah, he comes with the universe and he goes back.
He has old age. There's death. He has a long lifespan, but ultimately, yeah. So the spiritual world is eternal. The material world is temporary. So Swarga Lok also, that is temporary. It's a very elevated place compared to the earth, but it is still the material world. So the spiritual world we are speaking about, this is the eternal one. That is Vaikuntha Lok and Goloka. Yes.
This may be a semantic question, but is there a difference between doing something for Krishna and doing something for Krishna to make yourself happy?
That's well mixed bhakti. So my motive is pure bhakti. Motive is anukulyena, which means only to work to please Krishna. I'm not worried about my own satisfaction. That is pure devotion. Ananya bhakti is when there is no self-interest.
Ananya means it's selfless.
Pure. So Krishna will explain that in the 8th chapter. This concept of pure bhakti, where there's no self-desire. Krishna, I'm chanting my rounds. Give me less old age. Give me less disease. Give me less death. Krishna says in the 7th chapter, one who approaches me with some desires, they're still pious. Why? Because I'll help purify them with their desires. But pure bhakti, just serve Krishna. And have faith. Krishna will take care. Does child have to ask for food to come, or does it come? Does child have to ask for roof over the head, or it comes? Does child have to ask for a new pair of shoes, or it comes? Krishna, devotee knows, Krishna will provide everything. Here's my loving father. He will provide everything. What do I need to ask? But if child asks, no problem. But one devotee knows, no need. Krishna knows. He says in the 9th chapter, for my devotees, I preserve what they have, and I carry what they lack. With that knowledge in mind, then surrender is easy. But without faith in that, we hold back in our surrender.
So we talk about spiritual consciousness, which is maybe the first reason why we are in the material world, right? Because we started thinking that probably we are God, or we don't understand what's the attachment. So if that is the reason that the material world was created and we exist, would it have been better if we did not have that consciousness in the spiritual world?
Of course. Yeah, ultimately we developed envy of Krishna. We said, why you, why not me? Envy leads to hatred. Icha dvesha, Krishna says in the 7th chapter. We have this desire, and it leads to animosity. We begin to resent Krishna. Why? Because I want that position. So Krishna says, doesn't happen. Eko bhaunam yovidati kuma. You're always dependent on me. But if you want to try to experience being separated from me in the material world, Maya Devi is their illusion, you can try to pretend. But it's not possible. So that was our desire. It was envy. So we ended up here. And the whole goal is to free of envy. This material body is the proof positive that there's still some residual envy. As soon as the material body is gone, then I know I'm free of envy. So that's the desire. And that's why Krishna says throughout Bhagavad Gita, once you return to me, you'll never return again. Come back here again. Because our concern will be, what if we go back and they have the same desire? Krishna is assuring us it won't happen. Once we put our hand into a pot of boiling water, we'll never do that again. Oh, I know, that hurts. I don't need any more realizations. So, unfortunately, but remember, we are in a minority. Most jivas never leave the spiritual world. Why would somebody leave the spiritual world? This is a personal perfection. But we thought we had a better idea. And we still think we have a better idea until we surrender to Krishna. Any other questions? Yeah?
So maybe it is like not related. When we go into the spiritual world, we are individual soul, right?
Mhm.
So now in material world, we have relation with my kids, my parents. They are also like they have souls.
Mm-hmm.
So do we like recognize these souls in the spiritual world? Maybe it's a like a
You want the nice answer or the real answer?
Sorry, what's the question?
So the question is, we have relationships in this material world, our children, parents, brothers, uncles, friends, whatever. Who are also souls, will we recognize those relationships in the spiritual world? Well, let me give it to you just black and white, because I don't want to do you an injustice. Please forgive me. I'll ask for forgiveness in advance. I feel like we know each other well enough. I can be direct. How many fathers you have had?
I mean, right now I have one father, but we
No,
don't
in
know.
your
Like in
his-
prayer, I don't know.
Millions. Millions of fathers you have. Because we know we've taken birth. We've had millions of births. At least 8.4 we know we've been through at least once. We've had millions of mothers and brothers and sisters and relatives. So we are brought together in this life by the waves of time. And the waves of time will also separate us. And this example is given when the water flows up on the ocean, some grains of sand are brought together, and when the water retreats, the sands go in different places. Like that, these relationships we have, they're material relationships. So, the relationship that will matter in the spiritual world is our relationship with Krishna. Because that relationship we have today with whoever it might be, their relationship also is with Krishna. So in that sense, we are bound and united with everyone. So I see this affinity with my material father, material mother, But actually we are all related. Because we are all sons and daughters of Krishna. And we're only sons and daughters out of the material body. The soul is Prakriti. It is actually feminine in nature. So the short answer is no, we will not maintain those relationships. But because the primary principal relationship is awakening, and that's our relationship with Krishna.
Yeah, and maybe like,
Yeah.
like in marriages they normally say, right, it's like 7 janmas or something like that. Like one person is married, or maybe the relation that continues for 7 consecutive something. Is that real or?
Why?
That's maybe
Change.
different looks.
We need a change. Change is a life.
I plead the fifth.
We needed humor though. We needed good humor.
I know better. I know better. I can say she's not here, but she might be listening.
No, variety is a life. Like
Variety.
you said, I'm not saying anything. Variety is a life.
These relationships. So we should understand that the material relationships we have, we should see them also as spiritual relationships. When we see people like our loved ones, our relationship, if we really love our family, what should we do for them? What's the best thing we can do for those that we love?
Love them.
Huh?
Love them.
To love them. How can we love them? What does love them mean?
Show
Connect
them
them
the way
try
to
connect
go
them
back
to
to the
Krishna.
Godhead.
Is there anything else that can be a greater expression of our love? Give them happiness, right? How are we going to give them happiness? By giving them more money? By giving them more fame? By giving them more power?
In
How
some
are we going to give
cases,
them happiness?
that's all they want.
That is a
Each
material
its
world
own.
maybe.
You're right, that's all they want, but will that help them? Will that help them?
No.
It will not, right? Just like the child wants ice cream, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But does father and mother give? No. Doesn't mean never gives, but gives when it's good for them. So to those we love, we want to give what will make them happy. That's what love means. Love is service. Seva. That is love. If I want to show love to my mother, I can say with my mother, I love you. But if I render service to her, then that is real love. Service is the expression of love. When I render service in the office, it's not love. Why am I serving in the office? Because I want something back. If that paycheck stops coming, am I going to keep service? No. So that's not love. Love is when mother gets up in the middle of the night to care for the crying child. Are they doing that because they hope that someday in the next day that the child will do something for mother? No. That's love. So love is service. It is service without any expectation in return. That is bhakti. Service to Krishna with no expectation in return. So if we want to serve and love our friends, family, neighbors, country, whatever, have to bring them to Krishna. Because whatever else we give, we may give them some fleeting moments of happiness, but nothing that will last. They may think they want more X, Y, or Z, but we know all that's going to do is create more anxiety, fear, distress in their life. Now, the intelligent friend, family member knows what they can digest at that point. If they're not ready to yet come and hear Bhagavad Gita, okay. feed them some prasad, take them to the temple on some festival days. Whatever we can do, something to begin their journey. Right? They may not be, but that should be our goal if we really love them. And the devotee is very broad-minded, doesn't base on skin disease. This is my family, this is not. Very, very liberal. Wants to help everyone and anyone, not just their own. Because at the end of the day, we're all just part and parcels of Krishna. Okay? So this merging concept doesn't happen. Moksha is not about merging into God. Moksha is about becoming free from the modes of material nature. One can become liberated even here in the material world through elevated consciousness. It is not a geographic destination, but it is most certainly not merging into God. That is a complete and utter fallacy that's not supported in any Shastra. And as Krishna opens his instructions with this very clear and unequivocal point. But sadly, most spiritual philosophy speaks of this, which is the conundrum we are in the age of Kali Yuga. But by the mercy of Krishna and Guru Parampara, we can have knowledge as it is.
So ultimately, this is the argument between the
Arjun, Krishna.
no, when they say oh, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It'll come to you.
Duality and non-duality. There's another word for it, and I'm
Duality refers to, so duality is only present in the material world. And so duality is hot and cold, rich and poor, tall and short, because there's good and bad. In the spiritual world, everything is perfect. So there's no duality. There's only one side of the coin. But in the material world, everything has duality. So that's the, maybe you meant another.
Prabhuji, like moksha is misunderstood. Is it liberation from rebirth is also the same? Or
Yeah, so liberation from rebirth means, no more material rebirth, so one day can go back to the spiritual world. But again, in the spiritual world, we maintain our individuality, right? We're like that fish who moves from the river to the ocean. So the soul is moving from the material world to the spiritual world. But in the spiritual world, we'll have a form, a body. There are 5 types of liberation, one of which is rejected, but there's the other 4, the Sarupya, Shasti, these 4, one has forearms, this colored form, this types of opulences, living close association with the Lord. So there's very specific details of what the body, the soul assumes regains its spiritual body. So we have a form in the spiritual world, not just individuality, but we have an actual form. And that form is there to use in eternal service to Krishna. But that form doesn't deteriorate, right? This form gets tired and has to take rest. This form gets hungry and has to eat. Because this is material. That form is eternal.
Sorry for asking this question. When you say in spiritual world having form, 4 types of form, who saw that? How they imagine that? And because once we go there, we don't know what is going on there. I mean, we never come back. How one can tell this is how it looked like, or this is how the form is?
Who knows?
The book is given by Krishna.
Krishna knows.
So it's all given by him.
So who?
Krishna given in the book.
Otherwise, it's pointless. Because only Krishna can tell us accurately. We can speculate, right? But that's just speculation. What the spiritual world is like must come from Krishna. Because he can give us the accurate description. So in Shastra, there's elaborate descriptions of these different relationships, the forms, what it looks like, even the variety. Lord Brahma composes some prayers in the Brahma Samhita where he explains this after hearing about this from Krishna in the Brahma Samhita. So in many different places, this is given.
In other Shastras, not in the Bhagavad Gita, but in other Shastras.
Why Krishna performs his Krishna pastimes here in the material world? One of the reasons is to give us a glimpse of what the spiritual world is like. We see how Krishna interacts with the cowherd boys, how he interacts with Mother Yashoda and Nanda Baba, what activities he performs, how he does different things. Why? Because Krishna is showing us this is a glimpse of to what the spiritual world is like. So he performs, one of the reasons he comes to perform his pastimes here. So that we can see, oh, this is very sweet, very attractive. And thus desire it every day. All these pictures are things that are happening in the spiritual world. Any other questions? Shall we chat? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. I also brought some special